Join us tonight after the news.
And with the news now on BBC One, Rita Chakrabarti in London and Clive Myrie in Ukraine.
Tonight at 10, we are live in Ukraine as details emerge of more than 100 civilians held captive in a cellar for weeks by Russian forces. It happened in Chernihiv, a city once under siege but now back in Ukrainian hands.
There were people here, including dozens of children, who were living amongst corpses for hours, sometimes days.
In the east, Ukrainian troops are digging in. Thousands of civilians continue to flee amid fears of new Russian attacks.
And the other main stories on tonight's programme. The government unveils its long-term plan on energy supply, including nuclear power, but critics ask, where's the help with soaring bills now? Chancellor Rishi Sunak under pressure over his wife's tax status after it emerged she benefits from a tax-saving scheme. And BAFTA awards for some of the biggest names and the less well-known, which have succeeded in the gaming industry in the past year.
Here in the East, could wind farms become a feature of the landscape after the government unveils its energy strategy? And the solar panels light enough for a stadium? We're on the roof with Northampton Saints.
Good evening from the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, and we start tonight with yet more harrowing accounts of life under Russian occupation. The city of Chernihiv has just about survived, subjected to a siege lasting several weeks. Tens of thousands of residents endured punishing conditions with little food, water, or power. Whole neighborhoods have been flattened. And details are emerging of 130 people held captive in the basement of a school for a month. Conditions were so cramped, some had to sleep standing up. 12 people died, their corpses were left for days. Our correspondent Yogita Limaim has been given rare access to the area, now Russian forces have pulled out. Her report contains material some viewers may find distressing.
Another area the Russians have withdrawn from, more unimaginable trauma. Yahidne, a village in the northeast, close to the border with Belarus. Mykola Klimchuk took us to the basement of the local school, filled with the stench of disease and decay. He was held here for 4 weeks along with 130 others. The elderly, children, babies, whole families, rounded up at gunpoint, crammed together.
У мене було пів квадратного метра.
I had only half a metre of space. I was sleeping standing up. I tied myself with my scarf to the railing here so I didn't fall over. I spent 25 nights in this position. The main thing I thought was, I have to survive for my daughter and granddaughters.
A crude calendar marked every day of pain. 4 children lay in each of these cots. The constant sound of bombardment allowed barely any sleep.
Значить, туалети у відру.
For toilets, there were buckets. They would overflow. Sometimes Russian soldiers took people outside and used them as human shields.
The room has no ventilation. Mykola says 12 people died here. Those who died in this room, they were mostly elderly people, believed to have suffocated to death. And when they died, it wasn't immediately possible to take the bodies out. Russian soldiers wouldn't allow it. Also, there was fighting going on outside, so it was often too dangerous. So they would then pick up the bodies and put them here in the corner. So essentially, there were people here, including dozens of children, who were living amongst corpses for hours, sometimes days, until they were allowed to take the bodies out and keep them upstairs on the ground just outside the school building. 15-year-old Anastasia was also held captive.
Мне даже очень жаль его, потому что, вот просто умирали.
I knew the people who died. They were kind. I felt really sad, she said. For no reason, they just died, sitting there. Russian soldiers took villages like Yahidne in a bid to encircle and capture the city of Cherniv. They weren't able to enter it, but large parts have been destroyed. A crater created by aerial bombing. A whole neighborhood in northern Cherniv flattened.
Не бомби, наверное, ракети.
Nina Vinnik's home was shelled. Her daughter lost a leg.
Ну и когда мы пришли в себя,
All of us were knocked out by the explosion. When we came to our senses, we began to search for each other. Then I saw her screaming, "Mummy, I don't have a leg." It was horrific. How does she respond to Russia denying its targeted civilians?
Вони багато брешуть. А ось вам правда.
Tell them to stop lying. They lie a lot, she said. There's a woman in a hospital without a leg. That is the truth.
А в його багато брешуть.
Yogita Lemay, BBC News, Cherniv.
The continuing distress of civilians in this war. Well, Russian forces may have withdrawn from around the city here in Kyiv, but the Ukrainian government believes the Kremlin will renew an attempt to take the capital at some point in the future. For now, Moscow seems to be focusing its attention on eastern Ukraine, specifically the Donbass region. The BBC has witnessed hundreds of thousands of civilians fleeing that area where separatists have been fighting for 8 years. Our defense correspondent, Jonathan Beale, reports now from Lysychansk.
21st century combat on Ukraine's eastern front can look and sound more like something from the First World War. But they've been fighting Russian-backed separatists this way for the past 8 years. Western officials say this is where Ukraine has some of its best trained and most battle-hardened troops. They're certainly not all young. From his dugout, 52-year-old Anatoly says he can already see Russian troops just 500 meters away.
If they try to take this position, I'll kill them. If I don't kill them, they'll kill me. Those are the rules of war.
They know their enemy can be brutal. They've had little rest from the fighting. They can already hear the Russian artillery getting closer. But they say morale is high. Without trenches to defend from, we would all die. But these trenches will protect us. Very different from the fighting that you've seen in Kyiv. In urban areas, both sides well dug in. Easier to defend, but of course the Russians have significant firepower, and we know they're bringing more too. The mass exodus of civilians from eastern Ukraine is already underway. This a 50-mile tailback of traffic heading west. The Donbass is emptying fast. We entered the town of Lysychansk, already being targeted by Russian artillery. Now a ghost town. This was a children's centre. Books and clothes now strewn amongst the rubble. But down in the basement we found a few seeking shelter. The poor, the frail and the old. Even before this war started, Russian-backed separatists were occupying part of the Donbass. And it soon became apparent that pro-Russian sentiment hasn't died here, despite their bombs.
I'm sorry, but it is my understanding that this land was sold. They are destroying our Donbass to give the land away to the Americans. The Americans bought it to place their nuclear weapons here.
Back above ground, we did find one woman, Valentina, who did blame President Putin for the destruction of her town.
Putin is to blame for the war. He gathered this army here.
Why did he do this? But our guys did nothing. They said they were exercising. Exercise is my arse.
The Russian offensive around the capital, Kyiv, may have failed, but here in the Donbass, they're slowly taking ground. Waging war by artillery, their tactics still seem the same. And once again, it's Ukraine's civilian population that's likely to suffer most. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, in eastern Ukraine.
Well, the call by Ukraine for more arms in its battle against Russia has been echoed in Brussels today as NATO foreign ministers agreed to send more sophisticated weaponry. Now, it comes as Russia has been suspended from the United Nations Human Rights Council following allegations of war crimes by its troops. Our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, is in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv for us tonight. And John, is Mr. Putin, do you think, likely to care that he's been kicked off the council?
Oh, yeah, it's a humiliation for him. 93 countries voting against Russia and only 24 voting in favor, the rest abstaining. But it simply increases the necessity for him to have some kind of victory in this war. And what the people here that I've been talking to think will happen is that he'll concentrate his efforts. What they're afraid of, really, is he'll concentrate his efforts on Mariupol, that city down in the southeast of the country, which has been under siege since very early on in the war. And he'll really want to take that and to have that as a victory that he can celebrate on Russia's annual Victory Day parade on the 9th of May. That's only a month away. That's why the Ukrainians are so desperate to get the Europeans and the Americans to give them more and more weapons. They need those weapons urgently. If he gets them, if the Ukrainians get them, then they do stand a chance of resisting. But they're worried, very worried, that the Europeans and the Americans don't really want Vladimir Putin to be humiliated in that kind of way, and that they're dragging their feet on giving Ukraine weapons.
We'll leave it there. John, thank you. John Simpson, our World Affairs editor there. Well, a video has now emerged which purports to show Ukrainian forces shooting and killing a captive Russian soldier. Jeremy Bowen is with me here. What more does the video show?
Oh, it's grim. Soldiers lying mostly dead on the ground, big pools of blood around them, and Ukrainian soldiers, seems quite clear that that's who they are, going up to them and putting more bullets into the body of a man who was moving slightly, then he doesn't move again. You know, the issue here is not what happened, it seems pretty clear, but what the Ukrainian government does about it, because the way that a government responds to something like that is a measure of its attitude towards war crimes, because that is in what happened if that video is genuine, and that's what it seems to be. More widely, Kyiv itself, quiet now, of course there's a curfew, but during the day, it's really been waking up in the last few days. The spring has happened, a few shops are opening, but, you know, it's very different, clearly, for people in the East. We've seen it ourselves today on this program, but also, you know, I've been talking to soldiers who are equipping themselves, going by getting more gear. They have to buy their own uniforms, go to get out there to get ready for the next round of battles. And there are those Ukrainian troops who the Russian plan, people think, is going to be to try to encircle them, cut them off and destroy them. That might be a very difficult thing, but what we're thinking about now is nothing short. This is going to be a long and grinding fight, as far as I can see anyway, as things stand right now.
Sure. Okay. Jeremy, many thanks. Jeremy Bowen there. Well, as this war grinds on in its 6th week, the Ukrainian government has made it clear there are 3 things it needs from its allies in the West: weapons, weapons, and more weapons. Russia has simplified its war aims for now, and so can focus attention on capturing the ethnic Russian heartland of the Donbass. That will mean unbearable pressure being placed on Ukrainian troops trying to hold the line there, hence the desperate pleas for more sophisticated weaponry from NATO. And in the middle of all this, of course, are civilians. Russia being kicked off the UN Human Rights Council today, testament to how the Kremlin has so far fought this war, seemingly with scant regard for the innocent. That's it from me and the team here in Kyiv. Now back to you, Rita, in the studio.
Clive, many thanks. Nuclear power and the production of wind, hydrogen and solar energy are at the centre of the government's long-awaited energy strategy announced today. It's aimed at making the UK much less reliant on foreign imports as prices soar. The plan is to get 95% of the UK's electricity from low-carbon sources by 2030. There are also plans for more oil and gas extraction from the North Sea, still needed in the short term. But experts say that demand could be cut more through energy efficiency, and there's criticism of too little help for those struggling now with rising bills. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
This is what the centrepiece of the government's future energy policy looks like. The 2 reactors at Hinkley Point C in Somerset will be the first new nuclear power built in nearly 30 years.
Do you want to have a go?
I think yes. He certainly does. The government's new strategy aims to approve another 8 reactors in the next 8 years to reduce UK reliance on volatile fossil fuels.
This is about tackling some of the mistakes of the past and making sure that we are set well for the future. We're no longer subject to, we're never again subject to the vagaries of the global oil or gas price. We can't be subject to blackmail, as it were, from people such as Vladimir Putin. We have energy security here in the UK.
This is how the UK generates electricity now. Wind, solar and other renewables make up nearly half, nuclear is 16%, and gas, the volatile one, is nearly 36%. That means low carbon, which includes both nuclear and renewables, makes up nearly 60% of electricity generation right now. By 2030, the government ambition is for low carbon to generate 95% of UK power, with 25% of that total coming from nuclear by 2050.
This is construction on a truly breathtaking scale, and that's the problem for some. To its detractors, it's big, it's slow, it can be risky, and at £20 billion plus a pop, it's incredibly expensive. But for the government, big nuclear is an always-on, low-carbon, truly domestic, non-imported form of energy, and that's security for the future.
Offshore wind power has already transformed the UK energy mix, and the government aims to quadruple output by the end of the decade. It also wants to revive onshore wind, despite objections from many of its own MPs, by offering discounts to those who live near turbines. A good deal all round, according to energy providers.
The best way of weaning ourselves off gas is wind power, and onshore wind is the very fastest and cheapest. We welcome the consultations and pilot programs which will help us prove that local communities want wind power if it can drive down their energy costs. And of course we won't build it where people don't want it.
However, remember, gas still heats 25 million homes, and many feel this strategy's focus on future power supply ignores the current crisis and the need to reduce demand.
Only last week we saw energy bills going up in the middle of a very real cost of living crisis, which is causing people real hardship. All we've got today is a cobbled together list of things that could and should have been done over the last 10 to 12 years. And it doesn't even tackle really important things like insulating homes, which would save £400 on everybody's bill.
The importance of using less rather than supplying more energy was echoed by other parties.
We have a big focus particularly on insulating people's homes. That's the measure that can help bring down people's fuel bills, keep people warm, create jobs, and create real energy security.
The Liberal Democrats want to invest in renewables, we want to insulate people's homes, and we want to slash taxes. That would be real action to give real help to people who need help right now.
Oil and gas prices have soared as Russian exports risk being either withheld or boycotted. Today's plan also fast-tracks new investment and production in UK waters to secure supply, even if it's unlikely to affect prices.
Even those fossil fuels that come from Scottish waters, they are open to the vagaries of the international market. Oil and gas is an internationally traded commodity, so if the prices go up internationally, we can insulate ourselves from that.
The UK's record on delivering energy projects is not good. In the 12 years since the government last announced a new nuclear age, this is the only plant underway. The government will hope the current crisis will provide a sense of urgency, even if this plan is not the solution. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, last year, the UK hosted COP26, the UN's climate change conference in Glasgow, which ended with a pledge to reduce the use of coal and to cut greenhouse gases faster. Our climate editor, Justin Rolat, looks now at what impact the government's energy strategy will have on environmental targets.
The UK has a good record on cutting carbon emissions. In 1990, we emitted around 800 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. But look at this, emissions were down 40% by 2019. That's the largest reduction among the G20 countries. And that is despite, look at this, the economy growing by nearly 80% over the same period. This is a big part of how we did it. Closing down polluting coal-fired power stations. Here is how much electricity the country has generated since 1990. That yellow line at the bottom, that is nuclear power and electricity from abroad. The grey area is coal, and look at that, 80% of our power back in 1990, now a teeny 2%. Gas, the blue area there, played the biggest part in filling the gap left by coal. But look at renewables, mostly wind and solar. That's the green area, from almost nothing to more than a quarter of our electricity now. It is quite an achievement. The last time emissions were as low as this was the late Victorian era. But deeper cuts are going to be more difficult. Why? Well, this is what we've got to do. Reduce emissions all the way down to zero. And here is what the government's advisors on climate change, the Climate Change Committee, says will get us there. There has to be a massive switch to electricity for transport. You will be driving an electric car. We need to improve energy efficiency in our homes and businesses. Now, that wasn't a big part of today's announcement, but cutting energy demand will be crucial, says the government's climate watchdog. And yes, it will mean lots of us ditching our gas boilers. We also need to massively reduce leaks of methane from fossil fuel plants, find ways to capture carbon dioxide emissions so they don't go into the atmosphere, and finally, there will need to be some biofuels. Now, getting those kind of changes on a national scale is not going to be easy. The big criticism from environmentalists today, too much focus on the supply side, not enough effort to get us all to cut our energy demand.
Justin Rolat reporting. 2 people have been killed and at least 8 people have been wounded after a gunman opened fire in central Tel Aviv, according to Israeli medical services. Our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem for us now. And Yolande, this is the latest in a series of deadly attacks in the last fortnight. Tell us what happened here.
Well, this shooting took place on one of the busiest streets in Tel Aviv. There's security camera footage you can see from the scenes where people are in a packed bar and they start to flee, scattering their bar chairs as they go. Police have now brought in hundreds of officers and they say they're still searching for the shooter. They've told local residents to stay in their homes. This, as you said, is the latest in a series of deadly attacks in Israel. Actually, the most deadly attacks there have been for several years. Now a total of 13 people killed in just over 2 weeks. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has once again praised this attack, and it's all happening at a very sensitive time. Tomorrow is the first Friday prayers of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. That's a time when thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank are hoping to cross into Jerusalem to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel could very well now introduce new restrictions because of its own security fears.
Yolande, thank you. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is facing serious questions over his family's financial affairs after it emerged his wife benefits from a tax-saving arrangement. Akshata Murthy, who's thought to be worth hundreds of millions of pounds, has non-dom status, meaning she doesn't have to pay UK tax on income earned abroad. Her spokeswoman says she pays all tax due in the UK, but Labour called for complete transparency. Our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus reports.
He's been called Dishi Rishi. The Chancellor and his wife Akshata Murthy are both millionaires. When he became a minister, he declared the fact she's a non-dom to officials. But now it's public, so is the shine coming off?
Chancellor's been very honest, very clear.
And she's, after all, a private citizen. She's not a politician. And I think her affairs were completely transparent. And as you say, there's no hint of any wrongdoing at all.
Under UK tax rules, when you're resident here, all your worldwide earnings are taxable in the UK. But so-called non-DOMs do not have to pay UK tax on foreign income. To claim the benefits of the status, a UK resident has to declare their permanent home is elsewhere. They must not have a settled long-term commitment to stay here and do still have to pay tax on all their UK earnings.
She will have taken the position she was domiciled in India, which may be a reasonable position, but then she made an active choice to claim the remittance basis, which means she's taxed only on money she brings into the UK, not on profits, income gains outside the UK. And that was a choice.
It's a choice that could prove damaging for him. He's in charge of all our taxes, just put them up this week, and has been criticised for not doing enough for the poorest. His wife, who was born in India, has shares in this giant Indian IT firm which earn her millions. It was founded by her father, who's now a billionaire, one of India's richest men.
We need complete transparency on this so that we can all understand what scheme she may have been using to reduce her own tax. But to use a scheme when the Chancellor is out there day after day saying we need tax rises on millions of people in this country who are really, really struggling is breathtaking hypocrisy.
We're told that Chaturmurthy has always paid all the UK tax due on her income here and paid tax abroad. But for the couple, there may still be questions. For her, how strong are her ties to India? A spokesperson has said today she intends to return there one day. So for him, does that mean he has no long-term commitment to remain in the UK? David Grammaticus, BBC News, Downing Street.
Pakistan has been plunged into a constitutional crisis after the country's top court ruled that a move to stop a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister Imran Khan had no legal effect. Well, let's go live to Islamabad and to our correspondent Sikander Kamani. Sikander, why has this happened?
Well, look, this is a political drama that's been full of twists and turns, but as of the moment, it looks as if Imran Khan is on his way out. Last week, he was meant to be facing a vote of no confidence in Parliament, which he was widely expected to lose after a number of his coalition allies deserted him. Instead, at the last minute, the Deputy Speaker of the House blocked the vote from going ahead. And instead, Imran Khan's party called for early elections, dissolving Parliament. Now the Supreme Court has ruled they did not have the right to do that. And so, pending any further twists, that vote of no confidence will go ahead on Saturday morning, and it seems the opposition will be able to remove Imran Khan from power and nominate their own Prime Minister without elections taking place. What has Imran Khan been saying? Well, he alleges he's the victim of an international conspiracy orchestrated by the United States because of his more anti-Western foreign policy. Most analysts don't believe him, but it is a narrative that's resonating with his voters. In reality, it seems as if Imran Khan and his party have fallen out with Pakistan's powerful military, with whom they previously had a close relationship, and that's the reason why his opponents have sensed a weakness in him and have launched this attack against him.
Thank you very much. Sikander Kamani reporting. United States Senate has confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson is to become a Supreme Court judge. President Joe Biden's nominee is the first ever black woman justice named to the court. Two more parties have launched their manifestos ahead of next month's local elections. Labour's leader in Scotland, Anna Sirwar, set out plans to deal with the cost of living crisis. They include a windfall tax on oil and gas producers to cut household bills and proposals to halve rail fares for 3 months and to cap bus fares. The Welsh Conservatives launched their campaign with promises of building stronger, safer communities and pledges to give local residents a leading voice on where new houses and other infrastructure are built. BAFTA has tonight been recognising